I was listening to the story about, it was a story of a family in Washington, and the little boy called the Bigfoot the Cowboy Man. And he had, apparently it had made an effort to steal this kid. And it hit me. My children were in that playpen behind me with nothing but a mosquito net over them. It could have crept up behind me and taken both of my children, and I wouldn't have known.
His father just got like a Mustang or something from Wyoming, okay? He had it out in the corral because he couldn't put it in the barn in the stalls with the other horses. It would kick and made all the other horses nervous. Had a Seminole Indian working the horse trying to break it every day. So they had it out in the corral. This skunk ape snuck up behind this horse and grabbed it on its hind quarters. This particular horse kicks out, jumps over the corral, runs into the pasture, to get away. At this point, the rancher's out there just blasted away with the 30-30. The skunk ape runs into the swamp.
I went up there one day after that, or 2 days after that. I went up there and sat in silence up there, and I'm telling you, man, it was free. It was crazy. There was a crazy vibe up there still. I did what I could to kind of get things under control, but I told her, I said, you need to get off this property. I feel like no matter how strong you are, it's almost like standing in the ocean. You can't stand still without moving your feet. You're going to get knocked over eventually, no matter how strong, whatever. You can't withstand a barrage of weird spiritual energy.
What is up, everybody? Man, I felt like I hadn't seen y'all in a month of Sundays.
Because we haven't.
I'm sorry. I am Wayne, joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Miss Tiffany. What's up, ma'am?
My hair was sticking up. I didn't realize that. Sorry, y'all. I had my homeless look going on.
Control yourself. We're on live TV, okay?
I know, and it wouldn't be live if I wasn't like adjusting something or
live YouTube. I guess it's not TV. Anyway, I want everyone out there to know that Tiffany is my brand new Lucky Charm.
Oh, that's
anybody out there watching the Tennessee game, y'all know it. The game started at 7:30. We're playing Arkansas, who is 3-2. We are the 4th ranked team in the country, undefeated, and we come in there and just lay a complete freaking goose egg. Yeah. We're losing. There you go. We're losing 3-0 at halftime, and halftime is when Tiffany and I jump on here and we're talking and everything. And what happens? Tennessee comes out and scores 2 straight touchdowns.
I know, and I said, maybe, because I'm trying to be supportive, because that's what friends do. And I'm like, well, maybe when they come back, they'll score a touchdown, and then they'll have 7, and the other team will have 3. And what did they do? That's what they did.
Came back 7-3, and then it was 14-3.
Yep. And then we were watching the game together, and I'm like just spitting things out that Zach's taught me over the years, but I have no idea in which order this stuff goes in the game. And he was like, no, that's not what they do.
And on a day where the number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide lost to Vanderbilt, y'all let that sink in. People that watch college football, let that sink in for a second. The Vanderbilt Commodores beat the number 1 ranked Crimson Tide. It was great. It was great. I freaking hate Alabama. But anyway, we're taking up too much time talking about college football. The game is on in the background. Y'all have my attention. Our guest, Mr. Benny, backstage, has my attention. We will get to him in a moment, but we got to pay some bills.
Yeah. Let's see. Do I remember how to do this?
Yeah. It was the banner. All right, let's do this. If you guys are new to the program, we are very, very happy to have you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before you leave, please hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends, tell your mom and them. Help us continue to grow the show. Keep it going in the right direction. Before you leave, please hit that subscribe button.
And if you would like to be on with Wayne and myself, you can reach out to both of us, Wayne at paranormalworldproductions.com or me, Tiffany at paranormalworldproductions.com. And we are quickly filling up October. So you can email us and we can schedule you in.
Paranormalworldproductions.com is our website. We invite everyone to head over there and check it out. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out all the other podcasts under the studio's umbrella, all that cool stuff. But you got to head over to paranormalworldproductions.com to do so.
And if you have any questions for tonight's guest, we ask that you put them in all capital letters, and we snatch them up and save them till the end of the show. But if you put them in all capital letters, I will be sure to see them way better. Please.
And real quickly, Manimal Research is the organization that I founded. We go out and do investigations. We have signed up all kind of new members in several different states. So if you are interested in becoming a member and getting out, doing some research, we would love to have you. I'd love to talk to you about that. Hit me up at my website or join the Manimal Research Facebook group, and you can contact me that way. But I would love to talk to you about it. All right, and
Goonie Goo
Goonie Goo Goo super sticker, $20. Thank you so much.
I love your name, by the way. Every time I see it in here when we do our shows, I'm like, Goonie Goo Goo, Goonie Goo Goo.
I'm trying to figure out what's up with that picture. Is that like a dead Bigfoot or a Bigfoot costume? What? I don't know. Kind of creepy.
A very hungry Bigfoot.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, speaking of the super stickers, you guys have been coming through for us so very much. Last month, based on our months prior, last month was a bit of a disappointment. We just barely cleared $200. The couple months prior, we had gone over $300. So, we're grateful for everything that we get, but I don't know if it had anything to do with, look at Chris Blaylock hitting us with another 20 spot. Thank you, ma'am.
Times is hard for everybody, man. Times is hard.
That's right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
But yeah, we were down last month. But we're grateful for whatever you guys could do. We love y'all. We appreciate it so very much.
100%.
But those super stickers are open. Our memberships are open. They are $1.99 a month. If you would like to become a PO freak, we would love to have you. Get access to all kind of extra content. Tomorrow, we will be releasing to the public the very first, what do you call it? Spooky Sundays?
Sundays, yes.
Yeah. But for our members, that's been up for a couple of days. But Tiffany, go ahead and tell everybody about Spooky Sundays.
Spooky Sundays is just a time to get together in the month of October and tell spooky tales. And I am like really excited about it. I think I did really, I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I think I did really good with the first one I've ever done. I used my little mysterious ghosty voice. You know, I played that for Carrie today and she's like, that is not my mother. That is not my mother talking. And I was like, I assure you it is. But it comes out every Sunday. If it comes out earlier than that, then our, members get to see it first and then it will come out every Sunday. So,
yeah, and I'm going to be taking the audio from those and the Spooky Sundays that come out on YouTube on Sundays. I will be releasing to podcast on Mondays. So you'll get Spooky Sundays on Monday.
Yep.
Well, got a problem with that? I'm sorry.
No, see, Spooky Sundays turns into Monstrous Mondays. So it all works out.
Yeah, it does. All righty. That's enough of all of that. We got Mr. Vinny backstage. Vinny is a paranormal investigator. He does lectures. He does talks on the paranormal. He is I don't know how much he wants to share of what he's got going on now, so we'll just let him do that. But yeah, Vinny's a cool guy. Met him on Instagram, reached out, and decided to have him on as a guest. And I am very, very excited. And if you don't have anything else, man, we're going to go ahead and bring up Vinny.
I absolutely do not.
Vinny, what's up, buddy?
Hey.
Hello.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Wayne and Tiffany, for having me on tonight and letting me be a part of your community that you've created.
Of course. We have a very open and welcoming. They're our family, you know. We've acquired this really good relationship, so we're always happy to bring people in.
Yeah, well, I tend to find that to be the case, especially in the paranormal, but we see that in a lot of like subculture groups, you know, and I'm a big fan of pro wrestling and in addition to the paranormal and, you know, and other things as well. And you tend to see people form these bonds in these groups, and it's really nice. So we could talk more about that later. I think it all kind of plays a role into why we are so attracted to the things that we are in life, our hobbies, our interests, and certainly the paranormal is no exception to that. So I got some ideas and theories about that.
Yeah, very cool. Vinny, you are in New York, correct? You live in New York.
Yes, sir.
All right, and you got your your interest in the paranormal. You were in college, and in your dorm room, you had something happen, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, you want to share that with us?
Yes, gladly. So actually, to be perfectly honest, my interest began, 20 something years earlier than that. When I was I guess a toddler, my mom threw my dad out of the house and she said, "Vic, do not come back until you find the Ghostbusters proton pack that I had been crying about." I'd seen the commercial for the TV and I'd been crying about it. And so my mom said, "Get out and do not come back until you find it." And he did. And it kind of, was off to the races from there. And it wasn't until I was a little, almost into my 30s that I realized that the movies that I loved the most as a toddler, as a baby, as a little kid, all had something to do with the supernatural in one way or the other. Ghostbusters, Harry and the Hendersons, and Back to the Future. And I think that definitely informed what would be a lifelong journey. When I was, 10, 11, 12, I really got into, being that it was the 90s, as I think we can all relate, I really fell in love with shows like In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries and, just the early days of the paranormal just starting to find their way into the mainstream TV industry. And then, of course, with the advent of reality television, we have Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures. And now you have all the various offshoots and different varieties of ghost hunting made available to different demographics. But yes, so most of my life, my early life, I was fascinated with the topic of the paranormal and all things supernatural, but at the same time, I was terrified of it. To be perfectly honest, I was terrified of the dark. I was really scared of monsters and Bigfoot and UFOs, but yet I loved watching movies I couldn't get enough of it. And so my parents actually split when I was about 3 or 4. And so I spent most of my weekends at my dad's house. And, it was a very different set of rules at dad's house. We'd stay up late watching movies and stuff like that. And back then, you guys might know this or remember this, but there was Joe Bob Briggs. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he had a movie, like Saturday night movie specials, and he would host like scary movies. And that's kind of where my fascination with scary movies came into play as well. But When I got into college, it kind of was something that I kind of forgot about, and I was just like was moving on with adulthood and life. And then, but anytime a ghost story would pop up or anything like that, I was fascinated. And then I had always heard, so I went to school in upstate New York. I'm from Long Island originally, anyone who's familiar with New York geography. So I'm from downstate New York. And I went to school upstate. It's about six hours away from where I grew up. And as a freshman, we always heard these stories about various, urban legends and ghost stories around campus. We would hear them from, RAs and other people who'd worked on campus for years. And the university police would tell us some stories that they had heard, back in the day. And then in my senior year, I actually got to experience what I believe was my most profound to date, actually, paranormal experience. And that's what really got me started. So basically what happened was I worked as a night desk attendant, and I sat in the lobby of the building that I lived in. And I would do this a couple of nights a week, and I would have to be down there from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. And basically I would have to check the IDs of anyone who was coming into the building. And I think it was like a Tuesday night. It was a very quiet night, and it was after midnight. And I needed to get something so I sat at a desk, and facing straight ahead of me was a giant window. And down this little hallway, and to the right was like the door that you would come in from the outside. And then to the left of me, recessed into the wall, was a men's room and a women's room. And then to my immediate right was like a big common room area. And then behind me was a hallway that led to 2 elevators and then a stairwell. And my back was up against the exterior of what was the office that the RAs worked in during the day. So as I said, it was a Tuesday night. It was after midnight. I had to get something from the office. So I stood up. I walked around the corner to go into the office. I went to go open the door. It was locked. I came back around to get the keys off of the desk. That whole exchange right there took maybe 4 or 5 seconds, right? And in that time, I would have heard everything. I would have seen everything. No one came in. Everything was right in front of me. It was a very small lobby area. There was no way anyone could have gotten in that I wouldn't have seen. And as I said, I'd been there since 10 p.m. It was now after midnight, and no one had come in for at least 45 minutes to an hour. So when I came back around to the desk to get the keys off the corner of the desk, I heard what sounded like some kind of rustling. I said, what the hell is that? So I walked over to the window thinking that it was the wind going through the leaves, and I looked and I didn't see them moving. I was like, what the hell? And as I came back, I was now passing the bathroom that I had mentioned just a few moments ago that's recessed into the wall on the left-hand side. I said, what the hell is that? And I got closer to the bathroom, and sure enough, I opened the men's room door, and the lights were off, but the faucet was turned on. And I turned the light on, I looked at the sink, and I just stood there in disbelief. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And so I walked over and I turned off the faucet. Now, mind you, it wasn't a motion sensor. They wasn't that popular back. That style of faucet wasn't that commonly used, I guess, back then. It was still an old-fashioned like knob. And turned it off, and I just stood there in total disbelief. And in that moment, it was like a flood of like emotion and a flood of just like thoughts and just like, okay, did I just imagine? It was probably one of the only moments in my life that I had to really stop and think, did I imagine what I just saw? Right? Is my eyes actually playing tricks on me? And in that moment, I also thought back to, because I worked back home when I would be on vacation or summers, I would work at a hardware store for a number of years. And I remember a plumber who would come in, and he told a story about this older couple. They bought a house. They hired him to go do some plumbing work. He left, did everything. A week later, they called him and they said, hey, we're suing you because you left the hot water running in the house and it ruined the wallpaper in the bathroom. He said, sir, why would I do that? I've been a professional plumber for 30 years. I wouldn't just leave faucets running. And I said, we're suing you. He goes, all right, do what you got to do. About a week after that, he gets a phone call from the guy again, says, yeah, never mind, we're moving out. He goes, well, what happened? He goes, well, we moved in, and the first night we hear people running up and down the hallway. We have faucets turning on when we walk past them. We hear people up in the attic. We're getting the hell out of the house. And so I thought of that guy, and I thought of my own father, who was a contractor, and just my own, helping him growing up and stuff like that, and basic knowledge of plumbing and how faucets work. I was like, okay, could it be that the washer got so warped that the pressure in the faucet, what was going up and made it turn? I don't know, maybe, could be, but like, it was just so surreal. But the story doesn't end there. So anyway, so I go back to my desk. I'm sitting there in disbelief. I call my roommates. I say, you guys got to come down. It's like they come down. I tell them what happened. They were like laughing at me, basically. And then they went back upstairs. And then the rest of the night, the elevators, there's 2 elevators that were like kind of behind me and to the right. They kept opening and closing all night. Same thing happened to another night desk attendant a couple of weeks later, a girl. Then we found out from the RD of the building, her name was Marsha, and she was a full-time, this was her full-time job. She was like the dorm mom, I guess. I don't know. She was the RD, resident director of that dorm. And she had been working at the college since like the 70s. This story that I'm telling took place in 2009 or 2010. It was my senior year of college. And the one year that Marsha was working in another building, a male RA had hanged himself in the stairwell behind where we were sitting. So when I found that out and I pieced it together, male RA, men's room, in the same dorm. Now, could it be too good to be true? Maybe. You know what I mean? Going back to what I said a little earlier about how much I love scary movies and ghost stories, whatever. Could it be that I just wanted to believe that and set me on this path? I was looking for any excuse. Could be. Or maybe it is what it is. And sometimes fact is stranger than fiction. But nonetheless, that's what kind of really started me. That was the moment in which I said, okay, this is something that I need to investigate and get some resolution on. Little did I know what was to come. My first actual ghost hunt took place about a year later, and we could get into that more if you want, or if you want me to keep going. But basically, that was the start. That was the start for me.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually keep going into that.
So, okay, so as I said, I graduated college in 2010. As I mentioned, I'm from downstate New York. I'm from Long Island. And for those who are not familiar, again, with New York geography, Long Island, if you were to look at a map of the U.S. or a map of New York, Long Island is the fish-looking thing that's attached to the bottom of New York State. And where I grew up was about 2 hours from downtown Manhattan in New York City. But anyway, I actually went to college I have a bachelor's degree in communications, radio, TV production, and then I have another bachelor's in theater. So I was extremely fortunate to very early in life to pursue a passion of mine, and that was performance, but more so directing and theater administration and producing and stuff like that. And I was very fortunate to have those opportunities as a young person and to realize that that's what I wanted to do in life. And I got to do that in college. And then when I graduated, I moved back downstate to New York City, and I was living in Brooklyn, and I bounced all over New York State for a couple of years there. But, I lived all over the city. Ultimately, I said, okay, well, 30 is right around the corner, and I don't necessarily want to give up on, pursuing a career in the arts or acting or what have you. But at the same time, I grew up in a very blue collar, working class, pragmatic household. And so I needed to be able to justify to myself pursuing my art while at the same time not badgering my parents with what I chose to pursue in college, right? So I took on that responsibility. I wasn't going to bother mom and dad, and I also didn't want to. I wanted to have options, as I got older. So I said, all right, well, I don't want to work in a restaurant forever, although people do that and they make a great career, especially in New York. But I wanted to have a little more stability. So I thought of one of my favorite actors, Steve Buscemi, who was not a lot of people know this. He was a New York City firefighter. Matter of fact, after 9/11, he returned to his house, his old firehouse, and he helped with the recovery effort. So I said, I'll become a firefighter. So the first step was I became an EMT, and I was working on an ambulance in Brooklyn. And my plan was to become a firefighter and be in the FDNY. And as a person who lived through 9/11 and had family that was affected by that, I was like, yeah, no, that's a calling to me. And but I also will be able to then go out on my days off and try to get an agent, go to grad school, do all that stuff. So while I was in the pursuit of working in EMS and waiting for the fire department to have, tests coming up and stuff like that, as fate would have it, my one of my good friends at the time was getting married, and he was a guy that I would, after college. So to back up a little bit, to jump around the story a little bit, when I graduated college the year after, I stayed in the city where I went to school, and I went to school. So I stayed in Rochester, New York, and I had an internship at a theater there in Rochester. And so and it was an unpaid internship, and I was working at a terrible restaurant during the day to try to pay bills at this apartment that I had in the city. And the little bit of happiness that I had, as broke as I was and everything like that, I was doing the thing that I loved. I was doing my theater thing. But at the same time, at night, I would go to my friend's house and we would watch Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, all that stuff. And I never really knew this was a kid that I, came up, doing theater stuff with in college. I never really knew that he also was as into the paranormal as I was. And so he and I got to hanging out, got to talking, and there we were, just like, crushing Dr. Peppers and talking ghosts. And that's how I kind of really got into ghost hunting. And I had my first official ghost hunt with a bunch of the actors from Jiva Theater, where I was doing my internship at the time. This was in 2011. We did our first ghost hunt at Valentine. Historical museum or society, I forget what but it's called Valentine, and it's this big giant historical house in the town of Victor, New York, which is just outside Rochester. And that's kind of like, again, that was my first exposure to actually doing an investigation with equipment, with reported history there of paranormal activity, and I was hooked and I was into it. And full disclosure, prior to that, I was still terrified. I was still terrified as much. Now here I am. I've graduated college. I'm a full grown man, and I'm still terrified of the idea of seeing a ghost. Because what do you do with that? I was like, what do you do with that information? Here's a ghost. Deal with it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know what I would ever do. But then there I am, gravitating, actively paying money to go face my fear, essentially. So I did that ghost hunt in Valentine, and we had a great time, and I was hooked. And when I got there, immediately I was at ease, and I was just more excited to be there than scared. And that's when I realized, there's nothing to really be scared of until something actually happens. So then, the fast forward a little bit, about 2 years or so. Now I'm in New York. My friend's getting married. The same guy who I used to hang out on his futon in his living room back up in Brockport, New York, and now he's getting married. He's living in Philly. I'm living in Brooklyn. I'm working as an EMT. And I say, all right, dude, what do you want to do for your bachelor party? And being that we're such wild and crazy guys, we say, let's go on a ghost hunt. No strip clubs, no casinos, no nothing like that. We want to go and hang out in a historic house somewhere and try to communicate with ghosts. So I said, no problem. Let me set this up. So I got onto Google and I looked up haunted locations in New York City. And at this time, I was still so new to the paranormal, industry or whatever. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just, like I said, I went online, looked up a couple of places, and I think the second place on the list was a location called the Morris Jamel Mansion. And I never heard of it. I reached out to them and I said, hey, and I told them it's the case. Hey, friends getting married. We're not crazy. We just want to come there. Do you guys do ghost hunts? And I just want to say that this is an example of being in the right place at the right time, right? Because so many things had to be just right at this moment, at this juncture in my life and in the history of that building and everything, for the rest of what I'm about to tell you to play out. And quite honestly, maybe for me to be here today talking to you. But so I reached out to them, and a woman got back to me and she said, hey, yeah, we've had ghost hunts happen here before. And I didn't know this. They were on an episode about a year earlier on Ghost Adventures. I didn't know that until after I got in touch with them. So when I was talking to her name was Naomi. She said, she was asking me all these questions, and I was like, that's a little weird. Usually they're just like, yeah, okay, what time you want to show up? Don't burn the house down. Give us your money. But she was asking, what kind of equipment do you use? What kind of methods do you use? And how long have you been doing this? I was like, wow, they're really thorough about who they let into the house. Good for them. What I found out, though, at the end of the conversation, she said, well, here's the deal. We're going to we will let you guys come and do your ghost hunt if you'd be willing to come back on Halloween night and lead a ghost hunt for us for a raffle that we've had for people to come do like an overnight paranormal thing. Now, what this tells you is that at that time, even they had kind of did some paranormal stuff, but it was the Wild West. They really had no idea what they were doing because they had no one on staff who really was devoted or passionate about the paranormal. They were like, yeah, kind of. So we did our ghost hunt for my friend's bachelor party. We had a great time. A couple of weeks later, he comes back to New York from Philly, and we do the Halloween night ghost hunt. It was on that second night when I met a woman. I met she was the executive director of the museum. And we got to talking, and she found out, yes, I'm an EMT, but I went to school for theater. And, at that time, I actually was in a grad program for theater in the city. And she says, well, hey, listen, I've been interested in trying to commission someone to write and direct a play for the house. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and in that moment, my life changed. So what happened was I took on the job to write and direct a play for the museum. Now, I've done a lot of directing at that point, but I hadn't really written anything, and I hadn't written a long form, play. So I was like, oh, this is going to be a challenge. So I showed up the first day to just kind of do research. And I was like, well, what do you want the play to be about? She goes, well, it's going to be in the fall. So maybe something, about ghosts. I don't know. Maybe you could come up with something. So I said, okay. So I showed up, and the archivist handed me these stacks, these big cardboard like binders. And she said, here, you might be interested in this. And I opened them up, and it was letters and newspaper articles written about and to the museum going all the way back to like the 50s and 60s about the paranormal reports at the museum. I said, holy shit, this is incredible. She just handed me, a gift. And so I sat there in the attic of the museum, and I'm looking at everything. And I said, I know what I'm going to do. So in theater, there's many different styles of theater and ways you can write a play. But in theater, there's something called verbatim theater. Verbatim theater is when a playwright uses actual text from a newspaper, from a trial, from whatever, and they incorporate that into the script of the play. So I created a verbatim theater piece based upon the letters that I had, these factual letters. It was a fictitious character, but using these actual letters. So that was the play was called Awakening in Ink, and it was about the ghost of the house. So while working on that show, that was the fall of 20, That was the fall of 2015. While I was working on that show, they approached me about if I was interested in a full-time job as the public programming and events director of this museum. And again, it was called the Morris Jamel Mansion. And it's the oldest surviving house in the borough of Manhattan. Washington stayed there with his troops for 5 weeks during the Revolution, and so on and so forth. The longest resident of the house was a woman by the name of Eliza Jamel. Her husband was a French wine merchant, and then after he passes away, she actually remarries the former vice president, Aaron Burr, who, of course, is the gentleman that killed Alexander Hamilton. And nonetheless, there's a lot of history at this house, and there was a lot of paranormal history at the house. Now, going back to what I said a couple minutes ago about how right place, right time, if I had shown up 2 years earlier when there was another executive director, they would have said, no, thanks. We want nothing to do with the paranormal. We don't talk about it. And even earlier than that, they especially didn't talk about it, because all of these letters were just talking about, people getting shot down, trying to get information about the reports of ghosts and everything like that. And the staff at that time didn't talk about it. All they wanted to acknowledge of the museum was George Washington. They did not even acknowledge the existence of Eliza Jamel, the longest resident of the home. They just focused on the 5 weeks that George Washington was at this house, and that's it. Certainly, we're not going to talk about the ghost. So I was extremely lucky. Anyway, they offered me the job as the public programming and events director, and I said, absolutely. And I figured, you know what? It's going to take a while for the FDNY to get back to me. Why don't I take this job and see where this goes? Never in a million years that I think I'd work in a museum, but here we are. Mm-hmm. And so I was extremely fortunate that I now had a full-time job where I was directing in-house theater productions while at the same time developing public programming to bring in new and, other former guests of the museum, trying to, generate a new audience for the museum. One of the defining moments, though, early on in my tenure at the museum was when I said, listen, there's obviously an interest in the paranormal here at the museum, hence me being here. How about give me the chance, let me create a formalized paranormal offering for the public, and let's just see how it goes. We immediately sold out the first one. Wow. We immediately sold out the second one, the third one, and so on and so forth. It got to the point where over the 3 years of my time being there, without fail, on a consecutive basis, the paranormal events became the most popular event that we had at the museum. Now, for the bougie board of directors that we had at the museum, they hated this because, they're doctors and lawyers, and of course they can't be bothered with something silly like the ghost, but money talks. So it was kind of like a thorn in their side. I was really happy about that. And it just really got to the point where we really, and my point was, listen, people are talking about this anyway. Let's tell them the truth. And we're going to do it in a very creative and historically informed way, right? We're not going to do smoke and mirrors. It's not a haunted house. It's not, oh my God, I feel them, they're in here. No, it's not that at all. We're going to use this as a vehicle to tell the actual history of the museum. Because prior to that, people came in there talking about all kinds of crazy things. Eliza Jamel was a murderous prostitute. I heard this was a brothel. No, none of that was true. And then we also started doing private investigations, and it just really became a formalized, positive way to generate good money for the museum. And being that it was such a small staff, and unfortunately there was such a high turnover rate at the museum, because unfortunately with fine arts or anything like an arts institution, it's hard to retain people, right? There's not a lot of money in it. Hence why I was only there for 3 years. But being that it was such a small staff, but being that it was such a notable location and had such a reputable paranormal history, anytime there was a producer or a journalism student from Columbia or anyone interested in the paranormal, I was the ghost guy at the museum. So they said, oh, ghost, here, talk to Vinny. And because of where I was, and I just happened to literally be in the building, I was extremely fortunate to get in front of many cameras and to get on several podcasts and to meet a lot of people who I came up 5-6 years earlier watching on TV on my friend's futon drinking Dr. Pepper. Now here I am face to face with them, talking to them on Instagram and Facebook and text and stuff like that. It's been a very surreal experience. And then from there on, I left the museum, and fast forward a couple of years. Now I live upstate New York. So I live in Rochester, which is Western New York. It's between Buffalo and Syracuse. And I've continued doing lectures and investigations wherever and whenever I can. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that's awesome. And it's cool how things work out like that. I am so sorry. No, is that me ringing? It's not me ringing, is it? That was weird. I love the paranormal. I love the paranormal.
Who was that?
I have no idea.
It wasn't me.
My do not disturb is on, so I have no clue. Paranormal, I'm telling you, you know how it goes. It'll sneak up in there.
Yes.
But it's cool how it works out like that.
Like I said, it was something, and I remember a distinct memory as a little kid. I was maybe 10, 11 years old. I remember I was so scared. I was up at night. I remember thinking to myself, I can never be one of those people that I see on Unsolved Mysteries that look for ghosts. I can never be one of those people. And here I am, actively one of those people. So,
well, I share that with you. I share that with you because, I mean, chicken, 100% right here. Okay. So to be in what I'm in now, and I have that hunger to want to go out and do a paranormal investigation. And if you would have told me this like a year and a half ago, I'd have been like, you're freaking crazy. Yeah, right. But now I'm like, I want to go. But it's finding somebody that is trustworthy to go with.
Yeah, I mean, we could get into that whole conversation, just how the effort it takes to actually get onto a ghost hunt. It's just, it's just whether it's getting permission to go to a place, getting everyone has the night off or whatever the case is, or just getting people to respond to you. I mean, I've been doing lectures now since 2015. I've been doing lectures, and I've had my spots to where I go to every year, and I'll do several there a year. But being that I live upstate, I've tried to tap more into this market. And full disclosure, every year, starting in about July, honestly, June, July, I'll send out an email to every museum, library, potential lecture location, whatever. It'll get to the point I'll send upwards of about maybe 100, 150 emails. And in total, I'll get maybe 4 responses. And of those 4, maybe 2 will work out to actually be something. So it's just the reality of it, unless you have a TV show or whatever, but that's just we could get into that too, but that's why a lot of people unfortunately do things that I don't really agree with, but I get it. It's this fine line of urban exploration and then just breaking and entering, and I'm not a fan of that. Everything I try to profess doing everything on the up and up, and I advocate doing everything completely legitimately, but I could understand that people who don't care as much, why they're just like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to do my own thing. They'll break into an old hospital or a cemetery somewhere, and that's not how I agree to do it. But
yeah. Now, Vinny, you and your wife, y'all got married, and you did your honeymoon over in Scotland, right? And you guys did some paranormal investigating.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So actually, to backtrack a little bit, so we we got engaged, I proposed to her at a historic building in downtown Rochester. It's called the Times Square building, not to be confused with Times Square in New York City, but it's called the Times Square building. And in the basement of this building, so to go back a little bit, my wife and I dated in college. We were both theater majors. And I first saw her in a play freshman year. And I said, "Who is this redhead?" And I was absolutely captivated. And a year later, I saw her in we actually met in a creative writing class. We went on to then date for 2.5 years. We broke up. And then 12 years later, we got back together.
Wow.
In the middle of riots and COVID and pandemics and all that, we said, "Hey, you know what? It's been 12 years. I think enough's enough. Let's get back together." Actually, today is our 4-year anniversary of getting back together.
Happy anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But when we got back together, we went on a ghost hunt at this building in downtown Rochester called the Times Square building. And this building, it's got a ton of history itself, but it's also got a lot of paranormal history there. And in the basement of the building is a vault, and it used to be a bank, and then it became a restaurant, whatever. But anyway, a couple of years later, so that was 2020 and 2022, 23. I forget when I proposed now. Anyway, I told her we were going to a fall party down there, and it actually was where I was proposed to her in the location where we first did a ghost hunt. But so the paranormal has always kind of played a role in our relationship. But yes, we did go on our honeymoon in Scotland, and we did an investigation at a couple of places. We did an investigation at a battlefield called Culloden in near Inverness, which is in Scotland. And then the big one that we did was at Bannockburn House. That's just outside of Glasgow. And that was a pretty intense investigation right there. So right off the bat, we heard a disembodied female voice. We were upstairs in a room that was reported to have belonged to a servant of the house. And there was crazy stuff that happened in that room pretty recently as of 2018. And then when we went downstairs just below that room, we heard someone frantically walking around above us, kind of like investigating what did they touch, who was here, kind of deal. So, but yeah, that was a pretty intense investigation. And then Europe in general is just so rich with paranormal history, and just it's incredible. We're not beach people, hence why we went to Scotland.
Well, I think it would be amazing to go to Scotland. I'm beach people. I'll go to the beach, but Scotland would be cool too. And we had talked while you were backstage. In your opinion, do you think that there is more activity in places like that than here in the USA? Or is it more intense?
I don't know if anyone's ever actually quantified that, but what I'll say is that if there was to be more activity there, I wouldn't be that hard pressed to believe it, because there's just that much more history there. Like literally, one stretch of road in Edinburgh where we stayed, every foot of that place, you had the Mary King's Close, you had the Edinburgh Castle, you had, Scotland, especially Edinburgh, was just so wrought with conflict and with death and with famine and poverty and cannibalism and crime, that it's just literally everywhere. There was just murder happening, grave robbing. And it got to the point where, there was just so many, it was so bad that it was reported you could smell it before you arrived. When you were coming ashore, you could smell Scotland coming, because it was just, there's so much death and just, unpleasantness. And obviously we've had a bloody history here in this country, But I think there it just goes back, here it goes back a couple hundred years. There it goes back 1,000 years. You know what I mean? So I would not be shocked if someone was to actually do the study, for paranormal reports or history. Literally a barbershop over there is going to be older than this country and probably has had a lot of activity. So without even trying, it's just superior in its paranormal presence.
Well, I mean, that's what I was curious about, because I just seem to hear, because like I research the paranormal like a lot. So I just seem to hear more cases from over there, more intensity, and but I would agree it would be from the history.
Yeah, well, because you have so many overlaying, you just have so much different time periods that have taken place on one piece of land. Here, like, in Charleston, or in I don't know, in Virginia, or even in New York or Philly, wherever you had conflict of the American Revolution happening, or you have like Gettysburg, or you have, I don't know, Savannah, right? So like we have like these like pockets, these little cities. There, it's everywhere, but ghosts happen everywhere.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you a question, because I watched a couple of your videos on YouTube, and I wanted to ask you a question about the couch at the museum. About the
yellow couch, yes.
Yeah. Why do you think that cat
Yes.
always goes off? Or the EMF reader? Do you think there's like a residual energy?
I really don't know. I mean, like I said, why that couch in itself is fascinating, because the little backstory was that Eliza Jamel had a suite of furniture made by Duncan Fife, who was like the rock star furniture maker at the time. If you wanted to show your wealth, you got furniture by him. And so when we refurbished that, and I think the estimate was, if it was to go to auction, it'd be about $300,000. That couch right there. Why we had it out in the main lobby like that was beyond me, but nonetheless, because anyone could just do it. And I've seen people sit on it, put things on it, not just thinking it was just a piece of modern furniture we had in the hallway. Nonetheless, why do we get so much activity there? I don't know, but if I had to guess, it's because, especially someone like Eliza Jamel, she would pride herself on her home, and she loved to entertain. And there was that room across from it that is kind of like a sitting room, like a parlor. And that room, was off the hook when it came to EMF and REM pod activity. And I think it's, especially on the seats, we had the little chairs. They were more for the kids, and the couches in there. And it was just, I feel like it was almost like we stumbled. Anytime we were in there, it almost felt like we interrupted their session. I mean, them hanging out. So I think it's personal connection. And that kind of speaks to why I think a lot of people, there's this theory of, people want to go and investigate cemeteries, but it's kind of pointless, because a person is going to be more concerned where they spent their time and money, and all of their life at their house with their stuff, and not, where their body is. They don't, they're not going to care about that. They're going to care about the home that they invested in. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, you would think that if you want to go and have these interactions with people, you would do it where they lived, where they actually experienced life, not where they're spending eternity,
Yeah. So, and then there's a lot that could be said, and this starts to break down paranormal theory, if there is such a thing as hauntings, why, what do they want, and all this stuff. And, and I think to an outsider, like when people hear you're a paranormal investigator or a paranormal researcher, right, they think that you are trying to claim that you have all of the answers. Some of those people have TV shows, I don't claim to know anything. What I know when I do a lecture, whatever, is I talk about paranormal theory, terminology, the history of ghost hunting, how we got to this point. But mostly what I talk about is the psychology behind ghost hunting and why we tend to lean toward the paranormal at certain junctures. But like a common thing is someone on the outside will be like, I love talking to people who. I love when people find out that I do ghost hunting because it's like they're stunned. They're like, "Wait, you do what?" And then it's like the floodgates open of questions and everything like that. But when you have someone who says, "I have activity happening in my house or my business, whatever," and then they say, "Okay, how do I get rid of it?" You might ask the ghost hunter down the street. He might give you a different answer. Me personally, I don't think you get rid of it when you want to. I think they move on when they want to. However, I think that there could be such a thing as compromise. Hey, I see you, I acknowledge you, but here's the deal. You had your time, now it's mine. So let's coexist peacefully. No shower stuff. You don't touch my kids. No, nothing like that.
Exactly.
And, I'm not going to actively try to exercise you, get rid of you, do anything, whatever. Just be cool. If you can't be cool, then we're going to have to escalate this, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And people don't like that answer. Sometimes people are like, yeah, I get that. You know what I mean? So.
Yep.
Yeah. Vinny, one of the reasons I haven't done what you do as far as paranormal investigations, and I know the people that watch us all the time are tired of hearing this, but one of the reasons I don't do that is because I'm absolutely terrified that something is going to latch
Something
on to
coming
me.
back.
Yeah, and take it home with me.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that, or do you know anyone who has?
Well, a lot to be said. Coming from a very traditional Italian family from New York, if you were to ask them, hey, what does your nephew do? What is your whatever? And they'd say, oh, you're barking up the wrong tree. This is bad. This is evil. That's not a ghost. That's something, malevolent trying to, fool with you. And like my mother is a great example. I don't believe in that stuff. All right, Mom, so you want to come on a ghost hunt? No, I don't want to, I don't mess with it either. You know what I mean? But have I had anything attached to me? Not that I know of, but then again, sometimes I say I just might be the paranormal Mr. Magoo. I could have things probably happening all over me. I just don't know it. You know what I mean? I'm just ignorant to it. And I remember like a couple of years back, I got invited to be on a discussion panel at a it wasn't necessarily a paranormal event like con. It was like a kind of like steampunk and goth. I forget what it was called. It was in New Jersey, but it was kind of like an alt kind of scene kind of thing. And they had a paranormal portion. And on the panel discussions, myself and my friend who I used to, I do ghost hunting with, and then these two women. And someone asked a question, what do you do to protect yourself? And they went on, they said they were talking about how they rub an egg all over them and they use a feather or something like that. And they do blessings or whatever. And then when they asked us, I said, well, after ghost hunt, we typically go to like Taco Bell and then we go back to the hotel and we watch Family Guy. So the scariest thing is what's going to happen after the Taco Bell, I think. But
I think so.
And I'm not knocking them. I'm not knocking them at all. If that's what they feel they need to do, then do it. Me personally, I may have just been super lucky. I haven't had anything happen or come home with me or anything happen where I was like, oh, shit. Now, what I will say is related, unrelated. So my father died in 2019. He died September 1st, 2019. And at the time, I was living in New York City, in Harlem. And I had lived in the apartment going on about 4 years at that point. And I had never had anything happen. Actually, the first week I lived in the apartment, I was watching Ghost Adventures on my computer, and I had my headphones on, and I was still like unpacking, and I was watching Ghost Adventures, and I was like getting into this really intense part where this girl was talking about how, you know, she saw an apparition standing at the foot of her bed. I was like, oh wow, this is getting good. And all of a sudden, my closet door swung open, and it was my EMT tech bag had fallen off the shelf in the closet, and I threw my headphones, whatever. But that, I know what that was. It was just poor. I threw the bag in there, and it was just terrible timing, right? Other than that, I had one other thing happen where I don't think that this was related to any ghost hunt, but it was related to something that had happened in the apartment. So one day, so we had this guy that lived in my apartment building on the floor below. And this guy, he was an old man, and he was a drunk. And he was like a classic, like, movie drunk, like wino. You know what I mean? He was like a 1950s wino. He was just like always stumbling. He was just such a mess. And like he would like lock himself out of the building and then mash all the buttons for someone to let him in. Another day we got stuck behind him going up the stairs, and like his pants were just like slowly falling down because he was just so drunk. You know, he was just a fucking mess. Anyway, one day I walked up and I saw him slapping a puppy. He had a puppy on a leash, and he was slapping the dog. And I walked there. I said, "Yo, you do that again, we're gonna have a problem." He goes, "Yeah, what are you gonna do?" I said what I said. So slap that dog one more time and see what happens. And he's like, "Yeah, you whatever." He goes, go away. I said, "Actually, I live here." He goes, "No, you don't." I said, "Yeah, I do," because he was so drunk he didn't know who I was. And I very much didn't look like everyone else who lived in the building. So, but I knew who he was. Anyway, so I followed him into the building because I was going home, and he, you know, whatever. And so that was it. So he and I had a couple of run-ins, and the landlord called me and said, "Hey, listen, we're trying to get this guy evicted. Would you be willing to go into like landlord tenant court and testify about this guy?" Now, typically I was just like, you know what, I'm not trying to get involved here. You know what I mean? Like, I said what I had to say, and I was like, I don't think. And the only thing that made me think about maybe going to testify or say something was because of the dog. You know what I mean? Right. I didn't want, whatever. Other than that, he's just a drunk, and I don't really care. He's not really a problem to me. But because of the dog, I was like, maybe. But what happened was, one night, my friend came to visit from Long Island, and this kid never gets off Long Island, never visited. He only ever visited me in the city once, and he slept over my apartment. And the night he was at my apartment, I woke up in the middle of the night because I felt someone tickling the bottom of my foot. I was like, "Whoa, what the fuck is that?" And I thought it was my friend Alex screwing with me. And I look over, and he's dead asleep, and I'm like, "What the hell was that?" I was like, "Okay." I go back to sleep. The next morning, we wake up. He's got to get the train back to Long Island. We go downstairs. Cops, EMTs, the neighbor crying, whatever. The old man died in the middle of the night.
Oh.
So what I'm thinking is he gave me one last goose to screw with me on the way out.
And he said, peace.
Yes. Besides that, now that's obviously something to do with a living person. Back to how I started. My dad died in 2019. I had a couple of weird things happen after my dad died that I was just like, okay, don't know what that was. One of them was I had a like a pouch for pens, like pencils and pens, right?
Mhm.
And I had it in my bag, and I used it every day. I used it every day, and one day it just went missing. It just disappeared from my bag, and it just was gone. And I looked all over my apartment. I turned everything upside down, whatever. I could not find it. It got to the point where I said, "All right." I went out. I got a new little pouch and a new thing of pens and pencils. And then like 2 days later, there it was, right in the middle of my bag again. There's
That
no
is
way I
so,
would.
yeah, that's so strange when that happens. And like, you just want to say, look, you're a freaking ghost. Why do you got to be a klepto too? I don't
I know,
understand.
I know. And so the thing of it, and then so I'll just say this too. So that was one thing. I was like, what the hell? And then the other thing was, I was cleaning my. Now I'm a bit of a neat freak, and I would to decompress from the day of living in New York, I would clean my apartment almost every night. I was pretty religious about that. And so one night I was doing dishes, and I had a tiny apartment. My apartment in Harlem was about the size, I don't even know, like a small hotel room. It was very small. I had no bathroom. We had shared bathroom in the hallway. It was just a tiny little like bedroom, basically, really. So what happened was I was doing the dishes, and I had some paper towels, and I crumpled it up, and I threw it in the corner by my door, because I had like a garbage bag over there that I was gonna like tie up and take out. So I just had like a damp paper towel, and I threw it, and I had another one, and I threw it like that. I wasn't even looking. I went like that. All of a sudden, my lights went out. Completely scared the shit out of me, because it's a tiny apartment. I had headphones on. I was listening to, of all things, a paranormal podcast, and my lights just turned off. So I said, "What the fuck? Someone's in my apartment. How is someone hiding in this tiny thimble of an apartment?" So I run over. I turn the light on, and it was one of those. It was like a switch. It wasn't a toggle. It was like a switch, right? Like a flat switch. I sat there, and again, it was one of those moments where I was like, did that actually happen? And so I was like, the only possible explanation that this light was turned off was from when I went like casually went like this without even looking, and I threw a small damp paper towel into the corner of the room. And I sat there, and I took it, and I spiked it against the thing to try to recreate it, and it wouldn't do it. I don't know how it happened. I do not. And it to this day, I was like, all right, Dad, stop, kind of thing. But other than that, I think I've been extremely fortunate that and my wife and I collect oddities from all over the world too. So we have some really, really funky shit in our house. But so we might have like thousands of ghosts in our house. We just don't know. I think they might it just might be so crowded they all can't do their thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have all these attachments to all this shit and you don't know, and they're just like crammed in there.
Yeah. I've got stuff in the Middle East. I've got stuff from Scotland. I've got a rock from the outside the Exorcist house, where the movie was filmed.
Oh.
We've got things from India. Yeah, so.
All right. Well, we've got a few questions for you from our audience. If you don't mind, we're
Yes,
going to
sir.
go ahead and get to those. Mr. Troy is asking, do you believe areas of mass casualties are more likely to become haunted than, say, your average neighborhood?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great friend of mine, great investigator, and he is absolutely an empath. He was going to the One World Trade Center, which is where obviously the Twin Towers were. And when he was going there, he was with another mutual friend. She was the executive director at the museum, and he and I used to run the paranormal events at the museum. And she said his whole demeanor completely changed, and he's like, I got to get out of here, and it just jacked him up. So yeah, obviously places like Gettysburg, any battlefield, anything like that, obviously it just because not only the sheer amount of people that have died there, but the condition in which they died. You got to think of that. They died at the height of a moment of anxiety, of anger, of stress, whatever, and then that just captured in the atmosphere in that moment. I mean, that's some pretty heavy, but times however many people, hundreds of people died in that location. So that's why, especially as a history buff, it would be fascinating. It would be fascinating, but also it would be fascinating to do an investigation. I've always wanted, a dream of mine would be to do an investigation at Normandy and then Nagasaki, right? But at the same time, I don't know if I could bring myself to do that. I don't know how, if I could get over, if that would be too disrespectful. But that's the other thing too, is that people, because I've approached the Intrepid in New York City, which is docked there. It's a museum now. It's an old battleship. I've tried to do an investigation there several times, and they're like, no, we won't do that. It's disrespectful. I'm like, I'm not doing anything disrespectful. It's because of what they see on TV, and that's a whole other conversation. But, people think that for some reason paranormal investigating equates to disrespect, and I mean, it's not. If you do it the right way, if you're doing it correctly, it's not. But
I think that's unfortunate too, because there's so many places that could be investigated, but because of what is seen on TV, that is now the stigma that is carried throughout all of this.
Yeah, and listen, I get it. Like I would never have the audacity to say, "Hey, let me go to a site of a school shooting." I'm not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just too raw. What I will say is actually about 2 weeks ago, a very lovely mother and daughter that I met through the paranormal. They live in Chicago, and the mother, it was her birthday. I sent her a happy birthday message. She goes, "Hey, I was just thinking about you." And she said that her daughter went to the movies the night before, or like a few nights before, or they went to the movies together. And she said as soon as we walked in, it was just like this super bizarre. She had this like really weird feeling in the movie theater. She's like, wow, what the hell is going on? She was like kind of like on edge the entire time. Anyway, I forget what movie. If you give me a second, I can look it up. Anyway, come to find out, it was the theater where the shooting happened at the midnight showing of Batman, or The Dark Knight, back in 2012. So, which I would have assumed would have been closed, but apparently it's still in operation. So that speaks to that question. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
all right, we got Wendy Warren. What is your favorite piece of equipment to use during an investigation?
So I'm very much I'm an electronics guy. I'm not a Ouija board. I've never touched a Ouija board in my life during an investigation, or even at a sleepover or anything like that. Favorite piece of equipment, probably a REM pod. And I'd have to say also digital voice recorder, capturing EVPs. Okay. Yes.
All right. Very cool. All right. Also, Wendy Warren, have you experienced more residual activity or more intelligent activity?
Intelligent. Yeah. Yeah, and that's when you get that, that is just that's the moment where you're like, okay, now I'm hooked. Now I'm in. Now we're having a
Yeah.
conversation. And what I've noticed is that, especially at places like Morris Jamel, we would start out and it was almost like clockwork. The first 10 minutes, we'd get nothing. And as soon as we start talking about Elijah Jamel, or as soon as we start talking about the people who lived at the house, boom, hey, I'm here. That's me you're talking about, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So then we start saying, was that you? And then what you do is you're supposed to frame the question. You ask the same question, but word it differently and see if you get the same response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Vinny,
Yes.
take this opportunity to promote anything that you want, any websites, any shows, anything that you want, anyone that you want people to check out.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you both again so much for having me on. Absolutely love this.
Yeah.
I love any opportunity to speak about what we love, and that's all things spoopy and and haunted. So thank you both. But in addition to that, I am going to be doing a lecture at the Naples the Naples Restaurant Social Club. It's attached to the Naples Hotel in Naples, New York. And then I'm also going to be doing a lecture on Halloween night at the Little Theater in the city of Rochester, New York. They're going to be showing Poltergeist, the movie, and I'm going to be giving a Q&A beforehand. Besides that, please, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, Vinny Carbone, Paranormal Investigator, and then also my Instagram, Vinny Carbone. No, it's Carbone_paranormal. But if you just look up my name, Vinny Carbone, you'll find it. Going to be doing a little bit of a facelift there in the coming months, but all content will be up there for people to check out. Please feel free to hit me up. Any questions, any invites, anything like that. I love talking about it. And in addition to that, very completely separate from the paranormal, I also in the past year started a separate Instagram and YouTube channel called Macaroni Jabroni, in which I review different brands of mac and cheese, and that's a little bit of a passion project that I did with some friends last year, and going to be filming season 2. So I invite people to check that out. That's just that.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Send me any links, Vinny, that you want shared. And then when I upload this to podcast, I will share it. So, yeah, a lot more people can check it out.
Excellent. Thank you both so much.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad that you came on. I've been anticipating this because I like Bigfoot and I really like Dogman. It's my jam, but I'm really, for whatever reason, I don't know, midlife crisis, I'm hungry for the paranormal. So I was really looking forward to this.
Well, I've always found this funny because I remember a couple of years back, I've been investigating for a long time already. And then a couple of years back, a friend was showing me one I don't know what show it was, but it was to do with looking for Bigfoot. And I remember they were going through all the things and looking for him. They're like, okay, if we knock against a tree, whatever. And I was like, how the fuck did I know that? And then I was like, wait a minute, who am I to speak? Right. And then it kind of gave me this idea of I've always wanted to write a sketch where you got a bunch of ghost hunters at a bar or whatever. And then oh, great, look who this is. And then the Bigfoot people come in. And then the UFO people come in. It's just everyone's don't even get me started about the Loch Ness. You know what I mean? So but it's just but you know what? It's all love, and we all subscribe to. And listen, I'm a big time Bigfoot guy. I'm a big time UFO guy. So yeah, man. So I've always thought about kind of taking a step away from ghosts for a while and trying to tap into that stuff, but there's only so many hours in the day and so many cryptids.
Oh yeah.
But
well, if you decide to do it, I mean, Wayne is the man with the plan for the Bigfoot.
Yes,
I am very much a Bigfoot guy.
I would love to. I just don't know. Like for my bachelor party, I actively wanted to go. I don't know what you would call it, like a Bigfoot investigation, a hunt, or I don't know how to do it. I just need to attach squatching, right?
Yeah.
And you're in a great place. I mean, New York is not just, I mean, there are
Adirondacks? Come on now.
lots.
Yes. So so a guy I work with, he's like a low key. When he found I did what I do, he was like, Bigfoot. I was like, yeah, let me know. Let's do it. So he put me onto a website where you type in your county or whatever, and then it like spits out all the reports, like claims.
BFRO.
What's it called?
BFRO. Bigfoot
BFRO,
Field
yeah.
Researchers Organization.
I'm gonna ask you for you to send that to me because like I said, I want to get into this. Yeah. So yeah,
Well,
man,
and if
I'm
you look
all
up, if you look up, and I can send you his information. I don't think he would mind. Jack Vasey has been on our show a couple of times, and we just had him and Evan B. Stone on our show, and he is actually in New York. But that
really?
Yes,
Okay.
that is actually stuff that they do. So
I would love to do that.
Yeah, man. I'll send you any information that you would that you want. Like I said, I'm a Bigfoot guy, but I love the spooky. I love the paranormal stuff, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come and hang out with us.
No problem. Listen, one more thing. For anyone who do you guys like scary movies?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm scared of them, but I like them.
Right. So, my wife and I, obviously, we love scary movies. Okay. We saw a movie the other day that I have to. I'm telling anyone who'll listen, you got to check it out. It's called Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I forget how we watched it. I don't think it's on Netflix, but look it up. It's an Irish film, and the director. It's really only his second big time movie. It's still an independent film, but Oddity. You got to check it out. It was awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
I will look it up.
All right, folks.
All right. Benny, I appreciate it so very much, buddy. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Wayne, Tiffany, thank you both so much. You
Of
as well.
course. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, bud. Have a good one.
Have a good one, guys.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff.
I was so excited for that show. I was just like,
I know it. I know it. All right. You got anything before we get out of here, ma'am?
Yeah. Tuesday we are having Miss Chris Blaylock's daughter on, Miss Brianna.
Oh, is that who that is?
Yes, it is.
Very, very cool.
Yep, she will be on, and she will be telling us her spooky tales of her experiences at the haunted hospital that she worked at. So
awesome.
Come back for that, definitely.
I created the studio for that show today.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it'll be her little girl. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Good stuff. All right. I'm going to get out of here. If you are ready, ma'am, we will go ahead.
Tune in tomorrow to Spooky Sunday when it comes out.
Tomorrow, Spooky Sundays. Tune in.
And comment and let me know what you think, because I'm curious.
Tiffany is very proud of Spooky Sundays.
I am. That's my baby. But if you don't like it, it's okay. You just got to tell me. Okay.
All right, guys. We're going to get out of here. Y'all take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Bye.